session that day. So allow me to just introduce Professor Jordi to you very briefly, and then it's over to him. Professor Daniel Jordi was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, and studied business at the University of British Columbia. He has been a hospitality management instructor at Vancouver Island University since 2015. Before that, he was an F&B director at 3 upscale resorts on Vancouver Island, where he currently lives with his wife and their 2 dogs. He has been in the hospitality business since he was 14 years old. That's amazing to know, sir. In 2014, Professor Daniel Jordi started training hospitality professionals in the etiquette industry, which was included creating an audience service standards and mediating conflicts specifics to team dynamics. Daniel is also a certified kayak guide and loves cooking, gardening, and spending time with his wife and dogs in the forest. His favorite things from India are pickled vegetables and masala chai. So that's a very interesting and a well-rounded introduction, sir. I hope the audience will be glad to know more about you once the session is over. And we look forward to have a very engaging and very informative session from your end, sir. Thank you so much, and over to you, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much as well for the introduction. Well, welcome everyone. I see that somebody has their hand up here, so maybe we'll just start with that, or maybe you're just experimenting with the functionality. What I will suggest is that if you do have a question or a comment or wish to participate in some way, for those of you who are new to Zoom, at the bottom of your screen there is a chat function. So you can go ahead and if you have a question or something, please go ahead and enter it into the chat. From a sound perspective, we'll go ahead and run this in a webinar style. So everybody's going to be muted for the time being, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I'm just going to dive right on in here, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. So just give me one moment. Okay. So put that up here, and forgive me, but I'm just going to see, whoops, if I can bring up the chat here, so that if people do have questions, I can see them. So this is the introduction here. Today we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and the hospitality industry. I don't know if you've had a lot of exposure to this topic so far in your studies in India. But the hospitality industry, I think, is one of the most impacted by what's going on now by global events. Of course, all associated tourism is significantly impacted as well. This title page here that you see is actually where I live on Vancouver Island. So I took this 2 days ago when I was walking my dogs on a mountain behind my house. And I'm just looking here, my house is actually just down kind of right over here somewhere, a little bit closer to the water. So I thought you might be interested in knowing that. And just wanted to kind of orient ourselves to where we are in the world. The reason I'd like to take a few minutes to do this is because I really want to stress that you're getting an international educational opportunity here. Which is something that's very unique to Chitkara and very exciting. And I'm excited to be able to work with you from the other side of the world. Technology never ceases to amaze me that way. Where I am right now, it is actually 9:30 p.m. So in the evening on Sunday night. So you are 12 and a half hours ahead of me in terms of your time zone. And here we have India in green, and where you see the red circle pop up on the screen, that is where I am located on the west coast of Canada. And you'll see here is an island, that is Vancouver Island. So Vancouver Island is roughly the same size as Switzerland, for those of you who have done any European geography. It's quite large, and it takes several hours to drive up and down it. There was mention of my two dogs in the introduction, so I thought I would take a moment to introduce you. The black dog on the left-hand side, her name is Sonnet, S-O-N-N-E-T, like Shakespeare. And the dog on the right-hand side, his name is Puck, P-U-C-K. You will see that he is wearing a sweater because it does actually get pretty cold here in Canada, and he needs that sweater to keep him warm in the winter time, or he really does freeze. So these are my two dog children, I guess you could say. I don't have any children other than that. And this is a picture here of me and my wife. So my wife's name is Sabrina. A lot of people think that she might be from India, given how she looks. She was born in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada, and her family immigrated from Guyana, which is in South America. But the irony is that her family in Guyana had actually come from India originally. So her DNA, her genetic heritage is Northern Indian. So if she looks like she might be Indian to you, that is why. This particular picture is one of my favorites. It was taken in 2018, and we took a road trip across the United States. And this particular picture here is in Utah. And the reason why we drove across the United States is because we bought something called an Airstream trailer. And please forgive the rather silly look on my face in this picture, but I didn't want to deprive you of the photo just because I look a little silly. So this, what you see behind the truck there is an Airstream, so it's like a travel trailer, and that's actually, we have it set up here where we live, and we primarily live in the Airstream. So this was in Oregon in the winter time. And as you can see, Sonnet and Puck are there too. This is just a couple of photographs here of me, one taken obviously very recently, and the other one taken much less recently, of course. The photograph on the left was when I was 12 years old, and I was celebrating my 12th birthday in this picture. And that was the day where I decided that I wanted to pursue a career in the hospitality industry. So you're looking at that day and that moment right here in this photograph. This restaurant was a beautiful, very rustic restaurant. It was located right on the water, and my mom and dad had taken me here to dine. It had been there for many, many years, and I remember being very, very excited and taken with the staff. They were just wonderful. And ironically, several years later, when I was doing my internship for university, I was working for a bank. And someone at the bank, I started talking about hospitality with them, and they mentioned to me that their husband was the general manager of this restaurant, and they asked me if I wanted to go and work there. And I said yes, and was successful in getting the job. And believe it or not, when I was 23 years old, I went in and introduced myself to the very same staff that had served me on my 12th birthday. So I remembered them, but they did not remember me. Fair enough. And last of all, I just wanted to introduce you to where I work. So I live and work in a town called Nanaimo, which is on Vancouver Island, as we mentioned, for Vancouver Island University. On the left-hand side here is a picture of our campus, which is located on a hill. And on the right-hand side is our dining room, which is called the Discovery Room. And my job at the university is to run the Discovery Room. So this is our learning laboratory where we do actually have members of the public come in, and our students serve them. So the way that we're structured is our hospitality students are learning how to do the serving and how to run the restaurant, and our culinary students are doing the cooking for the restaurant. So typically we do like upscale French, a lot of French cuisine and things like that in the Discovery Room. So I just thought you'd be interested to see where I spend my days. But today we are here to talk about COVID-19 and its impact on the hospitality industry. And so this is a very fancy graph, probably a little bit unnecessarily so. And forgive me, I'm just moving my screen around here so I can actually see everything. So I wanted to illustrate for you that in British Columbia, which is the province in Canada in which I live, we have had a total of 2,407 cases of COVID-19. We currently have 51 people in the hospital. 12 people are in critical condition. We've had a total of 140 deaths in the province, and 1,908 people have made a full recovery. So we're very lucky. It was handled very well here, and you can see on this graph, I don't want to get into the details too much, but where British Columbia fits in terms of the global outlook and impact of COVID-19 in the world. So we have fared quite well in the grand scheme of things, and I feel quite lucky. I think that similar to you in India, it has been the same in the sense that our restaurants have been closed for the last 2 months. Some have been doing takeout and things like that, but like pubs and nightclubs have all been closed, hairdressers, all that sort of thing. So we've just been down to essential services. And actually May 19th, which is coming right up, for us is the day that our provincial health officer has indicated that our restaurants can reopen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in our session today. And Mr. Ahmed, if anything comes up, feel free to just raise your hand or put anything in the chat if anything's not working. So yeah. Oh, you were muted, but you're okay. You're muted again. All right. So going on to our next slide here, first I wanted to talk about, I came across an article that specifically talked about the travel industry and COVID-19. So I realized that tourism and hotels and restaurants are slightly different, but I think that we really need to look at the travel industry to help inform us about how restaurants and hotels are going to be impacted by this change. So first of all, who is going to travel as the travel industry starts to open up again? So the first market are youth, and the reason for that is that when you're young, typically you are willing to take more risks. So people who are young are going to be a little bit less concerned about getting the disease because they think they're going to recover from it potentially, or they think they might not get it. And so we're likely to see youth travel. We're also likely to see the adventure travel market pick up as well. And that's because people who are traveling for adventure purposes are more willing to take risks. Okay, so if you have people traveling for the sake of going on safaris or spending time outside, they're actually traveling to do activities that are fairly high risk, which means that they're going to have a higher risk tolerance than your average traveler. So they're still going to be willing to fly and travel around the world. Okay, the next market that we're looking at here is the luxury traveler. And believe it or not, the really high-end luxury market is not going to be impacted that much because there's already more space in that market. And what I mean by that is, if you think about how an airplane is configured, there's already social distancing in first class. The seats are further apart, people have more room. Higher end hotels, they already have better cleaning procedures in place, right? Also, people who are traveling in the luxury market, their income is not going to be as affected as people who are traveling for other reasons as well, right? So people who are traveling for business, businesses aren't going to be willing to take the risk of people getting COVID-19 and the business potentially being responsible for that. But people who are in the super high-end market, they still have money, they still want to travel, and they are going to establishments that already have extremely high standards. So it's possible that the effect there will be minimal. Now, once the travel market opens up, the last group that we can see traveling, or the reason for travel, is going to be family. So people who have been separated due to COVID-19, maybe they have parents that they want to take care of, or children, or that sort of thing. We're going to see them being willing to take those risks and actually travel across the world as well. Okay, so also the reason for travel. So why are people going to travel now in this new market that's different than they did before? And this particular article talked about it being all about the journey and who you are with. So a lot of people are thinking to themselves, do you know what? Now that I realize I can't travel all the time, I want to travel, and just the journey, the act of traveling is going to be more important to them. Not so much where they go, but who they're with. Okay, so the actual experience of the travel is going to be important. And where will we go? So that is going to be mainly determined by borders being open internationally. I think that people are going to pick destinations based on the safety or perceived safety of those destinations globally. But what we're really going to see is a huge increase in domestic travel. And so I know that, here in Canada, it means that people are just going to be staying in Canada and going to hotels and restaurants and things like that within the country. And I assume that that could be the same for India. I mean, India is a big, beautiful country. I only got to see a tiny bit of it when I came for a global week. I haven't been to the south or anything like that. But I imagine that people are going to be likely to stay closer to home. And I think that we're really going to have to think about how that shifts the industry, because businesses, rather than targeting international markets like they have in the past, they're going to need to come to terms with the fact that those visitors may not actually be able to come and visit them. So they're going to need to change their marketing strategy, their communication strategies, their pricing strategies, and probably what they're offering to have a much larger appeal to the domestic market. Okay, so I know that for us, particularly in Canada, the domestic market is not willing to pay as much as people who are coming from the international market. So we get a lot of visitors here from Germany, from different parts of Europe, and typically our prices are fairly high for them, but people who live locally, they aren't willing to pay. So we're going to see a big change in that. Now, the next question is how are people going to travel? And airplane is probably going to be their last choice. When you think about being in a confined space, in close quarters with other travelers, people are going to pick different ways. So we're going to see an increase in trains. We're going to see an increase in people using their own personal automobiles for travel. So I don't know if this is something that's really popular in India, but here we love road trips, right? So we're really big on our road trips in North America. That's what I had showed you with the photo of Sabrina and me going to get the Airstream. We drove 10,000 kilometers on that trip, so very, very far. And what we're going to see is people getting in their cars and driving. And so here the article talked about the resurrection of, we have here like what are called roadside motels, where often the entrances are all to the outside, so you don't actually have to go in the building. And that's going to become really popular because the perceived risk is going to be low, right? So, how will we travel? Boats and cruises are another way of traveling. I know that the cruise industry did not handle COVID-19 very well. So it will be interesting to see if they have a resurgence in business or if they are going to be permanently impacted by this due to a lot of the bad publicity. I don't know if that made it over to India or if there is a significant cruise industry in India, but here in North America and Europe, a lot of people got sick and died on cruise ships as well because they didn't take the risk very seriously. And then what will be different? So that's what we're going to be talking about today, mainly from a restaurant context. So my background is mainly in restaurants. When I've worked for hotels, I've ran the food and beverage outlets in those hotels. But the things that are going to be different are that people are going to assess based on perceived safety. So I think it's important to talk about the fact that perception here is very, very important. And people's decisions are not always going to be based on logic. They're going to be based on emotion. They're going to be based on perception. They're going to be based on fear, okay? And this is where I have this phrase where I say, consider the optics of what you're doing. So what we're going to see is a lot of businesses and establishments doing things to indicate that they really care about their guests and that they're taking all the necessary precautions they need to take, okay? So what we're going to see be different is that probably small businesses where people perceive that there's less traffic is going to be more popular. Hotels, for example, with private entrances like Airbnbs could be a lot more popular, okay? Hotels may have to leave a 24-hour period between the rooms being occupied so that the room can be properly sanitized and potentially give that virus time to die as well, even though it can live for a longer time potentially. And we're going to see lots of changes in cleaning and procedures. So, I've sort of joked that in a hotel, I don't know if you have this as well, but in North America, often the top blanket on the bed, which we call the duvet or the comforter, it doesn't get washed between guests. And so things like that are not going to be acceptable anymore. So people are going to have much higher expectations in terms of the cleanliness of it. Okay, so thank you for the comment. Road trips with families in India are not that popular yet. And so who knows, they may become more popular as a result of this. It will be interesting to see. And I would imagine as well that people in India may choose to travel by train instead of airplane. I know that, for example, like traveling between Delhi and Chitkara, you can take the train or the airplane. I'd probably prefer myself to take the train at this point. Just feels like it might be a little bit more spacious and less hectic than an airplane. Okay, so on to our next slide here. So managing the industry focus. I don't know if you're familiar with this, so I'll just take a moment to go ahead and explain it. What you're looking at here on the screen is something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Maslow is a very famous psychologist who came up with these different hierarchy of needs that every human being has. And you can see that on the bottom here, we start off with physiological needs. So those are our needs for survival, right? So we all need air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction in order to survive, Okay. Now, the thing about this is that you see them, they go up. So the premise is that once a lower level need has been met, then someone will pursue a higher level need. But they will not pursue a higher level need without having the lower level need met. So if it makes sense to you, if we don't have air to breathe, you're not going to be going out and trying to make friends because you can't breathe, you can't survive. Okay, so next up we have our safety needs. So this is security, employment, resources, health, property. Next we have love and belonging. So friendship, intimacy, family, a sense of connection. We have our esteem needs. So we have a need for respect. Rohit, I see that you raised your hand, and I'm just going to go ahead and ask if you have a question or you need something. Go ahead and pop it in the chat, and I'd be happy to ask or answer that question for you. As we sorry, just 1 second here. As we go up, so self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom, and then we have self-actualization at the very top. So this is the desire to become the most that one can be. Okay. Now, typically, I'd like to argue that when people go out to dine in a restaurant, we could say, well, they're going out to eat. I think that they're actually going out to meet their need for food, right? For nutrition. But the truth is that people usually go out to eat, and they go out to stay in hotels, and they take holidays for needs that are much higher up this spectrum that you're looking at. Okay, so the reason why people go to a restaurant might be to be able to meet a friend. So over and above the food, they're actually helping to meet their need for friendship. Okay, or also they might want to spend time with family. They may want to celebrate something. So again, they're meeting that need for love and belonging, right? Also, people may stay in nice hotels to help meet their need for status, for recognition, right? For a sense of freedom that they can go and travel around. And so our industry, depending on where you are in the industry, has typically positioned itself at the top of this pyramid, if that makes sense. So, people who are dining out in restaurants and who are staying in hotels, we assume that their safety needs and their physiological needs, they're already taken care of. Because if they wouldn't be, they wouldn't be going out to eat, right? So what we do when we promote and market hotels and restaurants is we're focusing on the fact, come here and have a good time. Come here and we're going to take such good care of you. Come here on a retreat so that you can improve upon yourself and become a better person, right? And now, in this new paradigm, we need to actually go back down that pyramid, because what people are worried about now is they're worried about their safety needs and they're worried about their physiological needs. So the way that we're going to be positioning hotels and restaurants in the industry is very different. Our messaging is going to be around the fact that it is safe, that we are taking every precaution we possibly can in order to keep our employees safe and our guests safe. Okay, so really focusing on personal security, on health, and those sorts of things. So the industry is going to go through a massive change in terms of how it communicates about itself, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. Forgive me, I'm just going to have a sip of water here. So also just, based on the last slide, and maybe I'll go backwards here for just a moment, if I can. Where you are in this pyramid also depends on where the property is positioned in the industry, right? So when we think about fast food, that is already going to be in the lower part of this pyramid. And if you've noticed that in Canada anyway, the fast food portion of the hospitality industry is booming right now because it is more focused on these safety and physiological needs. So people feel safe, they feel comfortable, they know that there are good procedures in place. Here in Canada, fast food restaurants have drive-throughs. I think you have drive-throughs as well, but I'm not entirely sure. So that means that, you know, we basically pull up to a sign that has a speaker, we place our order, and then, you know, just stay in your car and pick up the food from the drive-through window. So you never have to go in the restaurant or have contact with other people. Okay, so some COVID-19 facts, so frequently asked questions. And for the material that I'm going to be sharing with you between now and when we finish up is actually from our government bodies in British Columbia. So, and you may have similar bodies in India, and you may have similar information that's going out to your public as well. So these are from the BC Centre for Disease Control. And the first question is does cooking kill COVID-19? And the short answer is yes, it does, as long as you have cooked the item to a temperature of 74 degrees Celsius. Okay, so that means that, you know, all throughout the item would need to be 74 degrees. Can COVID-19 be passed by handling credit cards? The short answer is that yes, it can. As we know, COVID-19 is passed through droplets. So the potential that there is a droplet on the card, and you handle somebody's credit card or loyalty card, and again, you get a droplet on your hand, maybe touch your face, that is possible. So the BC Centre for Disease Control says that the risk there is actually fairly low, which is great, but that there is some risk involved. So of course, we want people to tap their cards whenever they can, pay with Apple Pay whenever they can. Some businesses here in British Columbia have said that they no longer take cash because they don't want to handle cash with guests, and they require guests now to pay with a credit or debit card. Okay. So can COVID-19 be passed by handling takeout containers? So here, many restaurants have been offering takeout, so they've had to close their dining rooms, but in order to stay employed and in order to maintain some form of cash flow, they have done takeout. And again, really the same as handling credit cards. The short answer is yes, right? COVID-19 can be passed by handling takeout containers. It is a surface that droplets can land on. So again, you as a business really want to be managing people's expectations. So what are you doing to keep that takeout container clean? Okay, how is it being treated? Who is handling it? And what's the risk to the guests? Okay, the next. So I just have a question here, so I'm going to pause on the slide and go to the question. So the question is, what are hotels and resorts doing to ensure guest safety and security in terms of health and hygiene to existing and new guests? Are there any ad campaigns and promotions already on? Okay, so a lot of hotels here have been closed and they're going to be reopening fairly soon. And some hotels are advertising. So believe it or not, some of the things that have been coming through my email box are actually from hotels in India that are talking about what they're doing in terms of their new sanitation procedures. Okay. Also, because I had flown Air Asia in the past, I'm on their email list, and they too have sent out emails about their procedures. So there are ad campaigns going on here. Businesses, any business who's advertising is mainly advertising about the level of safety that you can come to expect and about the fact that you can trust the business to be clean and safe. things that hotels and resorts are doing. So I don't know if you've heard of this term, but it's called blueprinting. And what they're doing is they're actually looking at every single step of a guest's experience through the hotel. And so what they do is they break down all the experiences. So they say, okay, here's the check-in process. Here is the process for ordering room service. Here is the process for using the health club or the health center. And they're looking at each one of those to determine how they can make those safe. So hotels have introduced new cleaning procedures for the rooms, for the restaurant, for the gym. There's a big part of it here is signage. So stickers are being put on the floors to remind people about where they need to stand in order to maintain proper social distancing. People are booking more ahead of time in terms of making specific arrangements around when they're going to arrive so that they avoid crowding, right? So there's a staggered arrival of people coming. But I'm gonna continue to answer that question a little bit more thoroughly in the coming slides. So I'll carry on with this. Next question was, are sanitizers different from disinfectants? The answer is yes, there is a slight difference. Sanitizers can actually be sprayed on a surface, and they don't need to be wiped off or rinsed off before you prepare food on that surface. Whereas a disinfectant actually needs a longer contact time with the surface, and then it has to be washed before you can put food on it. A disinfectant is more thorough than a sanitizer, but a sanitizer is adequate for most surfaces in order to address the coronavirus. So I realize maybe this is just like an off topic, but I thought it was an interesting one. And then a question that's being asked here is, should we be using disposable gloves? And you probably may think to yourself, well, of course, isn't that going to be helpful? And the truth is especially in a kitchen environment, disposable gloves aren't that helpful, because unless you're changing them all the time, because the idea is that if you get the virus on your hands, whether or not you have gloves on your hands, you run the risk of giving it to yourself by touching yourself with the gloves on, or by giving it to somebody else by cross-contaminating. So from our government's perspective here, gloves are completely optional, and if you wear gloves, you should actually still be washing the gloves and washing your hands regularly as well, if that makes sense. Okay, so next, and I think this is addressing a little bit more of the question that's been asked, is what will change for restaurants service? Okay, so I'm focusing right now on the front of the house in terms of the dining room. And some of you may have seen this. This was a picture that was on Facebook that I thought was kind of funny. So this is a cafe in Germany, and as you can see, they're making people wear these hats so that they know how far away from one another they have to stay. So kind of a fun way to reinforce social distancing. Here we have a restaurant in Amsterdam who has put a little greenhouse around each of their tables. Okay, so helping people to socially distance as well. But this, I think, is a little bit more attractive, I guess you could say. I would want to go and eat there. So one of the things that's going to change, I think permanently, is that takeout is going to be a much bigger portion of what restaurants do. Okay, one of the reasons here is that restaurants are not going to be able to take more than 50% of their capacity. Okay, and that's actually legislation from our government. And I just wanted to talk about takeout for a minute, because takeout's big in some sectors, but as you know, when you get into higher end dining, takeout is often not as popular because the food doesn't travel well. The food doesn't stay hot. A lot of chefs in high-end restaurants don't like to do takeout because once the takeout gets to the customer in their home, it is not a good representation of what the chef wanted that food to look like or even taste like. So a few of the best practices for takeout is one is to streamline your offering. So really think about what items are going to travel well and which items are not, and to make a takeout menu that's going to be appropriate and that is going to represent your cuisine very well. Okay, make sure that the items are going to travel well. And I think one of the key things in that is the takeout containers that you choose to get. So a lot of people here are very concerned about the environmental impact that they're having. So we are looking at biodegradable takeout containers and at least things that are recyclable. Also, containers that have a lot of different compartments can help the food stay where it's supposed to stay and not mix. Okay. Finish at home with a final oven heat. So that's something a little bit new. Okay, here where we're offering a meal that is maybe mostly cooked 80 to 90%, and then somebody can just finish it off at home for themselves and or their family. Something one restaurant's doing on Instagram here, which I thought was really fun, is they're having people take the food home and then actually plating the food beautifully on plates and photographing it and then uploading it to Instagram. So that's a way for the restaurants to stay in good contact with their diners, and also as a promotional strategy as well. Okay, so the next thing here is to determine the cost of takeaway and price accordingly. So you need to think about, when it comes to takeout, how much is this costing you as a business? You could potentially be providing utensils, you've got bags, napkins, takeout containers. What are the costs associated with that? And do you need to adjust your price based on that? Okay. We've talked about takeaway packaging, and then also making your menu accessible online. So if you're going to have more people that are doing takeout, they're going to want to be able to look at the menu without being at the physical restaurant. So how do you do that? And it's important that your menu can be viewed. Good question there, and I'm going to get to it in just a moment. Can your menu be viewed easily online? Can it be viewed easily on a mobile site? I've had some experiences here in Canada where I have wanted to get takeout, but the restaurant just has uploaded like a PDF document that's full of tiny text. It's really hard for me to go and see it. Not that conducive to online ordering. So restaurants are really going to need to think about that, especially the small restaurants who are operated maybe by people who don't focus very much on their online presence. That's something that's going to need to change. So someone has asked a question here. Sir, will medium rare and medium steak still be a thing that will be served in dine-ins or takeout? That is a fantastic question, and I am going to say that I don't know 100%, but here's what I will say about that is, when it comes to steak, most, if not all, of the bacteria actually lives on the outside of the meat surface, okay? And that's why you can actually serve a rare steak normally, is because you're actually killing the bacteria by searing that steak and killing whatever is on the outside of the steak. So my answer to that question would be yes. I think you are still going to be able to order medium rare or rare steaks. I think that will still be a thing. So somebody has said, I said hotels are only allowed to take 50% of their hotel capacity, so it will also affect revenue of the hotel, yes or no? So actually, just to be specific, restaurants are allowed to take 50% of their capacity. The government has not specified for hotels how much of their capacity they can take. So hotels in theory could go to full capacity, but they would need to have a safety plan in place to make sure that everybody is going to be safe. So Rahul, that is a great question, and I think that hotels may not be able to take as many people, so it is going to have an impact on their revenue. The other thing here in British Columbia is that no function of 50 people or more is allowed. And so that for us means that all of our hotel wedding business is, all of the large weddings are going to be canceled, which is going to have a gigantic impact on hotel revenue. And I know that in India, weddings are gigantic and long and very elaborate affairs. So it's highly likely that revenue is going to be impacted by that as well. Great question. So, and I think this speaks to this as well. So what will change for restaurant service? Lower volume and new business models. Okay, so restaurants are going to have to rethink how they do business. A lot of the times they're going to have to be a lot more cost focused. They're going to need to look at their menus and really ask themselves which menu items don't make money. How are we going to re-engineer this so that we can still be profitable? Okay. Sorry, etiquette is going to be redefined. And what I mean by that, and this is especially for those of you who are interested in serving in a restaurant, is that etiquette is based on, old rules that did not account for a situation like this. And so things that were considered polite in the past are now actually going to be considered to be fairly impolite or potentially even rude in the present and the future. Okay, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more in just a moment. But one of the things is that a formal etiquette would say that if you would like to refill someone's coffee cup, you should pick up that coffee cup, preferably by the saucer, or if it doesn't have a saucer, you would do so by the handle. You pick it up, you would refill the coffee, and you would put it back down again. Well, what we want to be doing now is minimizing what we touch at all. And so that would be considered to be inconsiderate. A more considerate way to refill the coffee would actually be to take the coffee pot and just pour, or to actually let guests pour their own coffee, okay, which in the past would have been something that was completely unacceptable. So I think that for us, we are really going to need to rethink about what service is, because when we go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need to focus on those lower level needs. What are people concerned about? They are concerned about safety and their well-being. They are less concerned about being seen and us being nice to them. It's still important, don't get me wrong, but if we're not able to assure them that they're safe, they will not care as much about those other things. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here in the chat. So I'm just going to attend to those. Someone said, I've already visited India. Could I point out how to minimize the disparity in terms of education when we talk about the course curriculum followed here in India to that of Canada? So Umesh, to be honest, I actually don't know exactly what your course curriculum is in India, so I don't know if I'm completely qualified to answer that question. I think that getting international experiences is always good because we're an international industry. And that's why I think it's great that you're participating in what we're doing right here and now, because you're actually learning about a different cultural perspective. I'm Canadian, and as I talk, it's almost as though I can't help but be Canadian. So you get to see how I talk about things, how I look at things, and that's something that's really going to serve you well in the industry. I'm afraid I'll have to move on to that from that question, because I'm not sure exactly about how the two course curriculums coincide. I do know from what I understand that Vancouver Island University, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we do actually have certain agreements with Chitkara that indicate that our curriculum is comparable. So we actually view you as a partner institution. And we respect your curriculum. So I think if you wanted to pursue like an exchange opportunity or something like that in Canada, we would recognize the education that you've received at Chitkara. How should a student prepare himself or herself to get ready if they plan to opt for pursuing their master's from a Canadian university after this pandemic ends? You know what? We can talk a little bit more about that also, maybe on a more individual basis. So I'm gonna leave that one for now, but we can get in touch afterwards if you want to talk more about that. Okay, so someone has said, can I tell you one resolution of how the hotel industry should respond after the lockdown to earn benefits, and what hospitality institutes should do to train upcoming hoteliers? So that's a great question. I think at this stage it's all about safety, right? It's all about how do you develop good policies and procedures in order to make sure that people are going to feel safe in the hotel. So I think that some of the training is actually going to shift from, how do you create this wow service experience to how do you absolutely make sure that all of these lower levels on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs are taken care of, because that's going to be really, really important. Other things are that I think there's going to be a greater focus on technology, because technology is actually what's going to allow us to have lower touch experiences, so to speak. So whether that means that, people are able to sit at their table and order from, online from their mobile phone, so they don't, need to touch a menu that somebody else has touched. So I think there's a big opportunity for more technology to be included in the education that hospitality institutes are offering. And I think one resolution of how the hotel industry should respond after the lockdown, I think the hotel industry really needs to focus on communication. And they also need to focus on thinking about the new client that is going to come and stay with them. So if they were previously pursuing an international client, they need to think about what a domestic client might want and what a domestic client is willing to pay, okay? So they're really going to need to change that, and they're going to need to up their game in terms of what are they communicating, how are they communicating, to whom are they communicating. That's going to be a really key change. Oh, fantastic. So we've got some information here that if you're interested in studying in Canada, there's a Mr. Amit's email address that you can take. I'm actually just going to stop sharing my screen here for a second, because you're asking really great questions, and I know that sometimes it's nice just to be able to see the full screen. So what is my opinion on the idea of small restaurants and casual dine-ins to getting people to adapt to new flavors and the true authentic style of preparations, especially in smaller towns and cities in the post-pandemic era? Okay, so Mihir, maybe you can just clarify that for me a little bit. New flavors. So are you proposing that menu items are actually going to change as a result of the pandemic? Is that what you're saying? you want me to unmute you and you can ask, we can just talk about that for a moment. Okay, let me find you here. This is great. There is a huge, there are so many of you. This is fantastic. Sorry everyone, and thanks for bearing with me on this. Here we go. So Mihir, I have unmuted you, so you should be able to, there we go.
Sure, sir. First of all, I'd like to thank you all. What I actually meant to ask was, like, in small towns and cities, the people, they are not ready to accept new flavors from different countries and the global trends. So I wanted to ask that would it be possible for people, especially in these small towns and cities, to adapt to new flavors, especially during the pandemic era or the post-pandemic?
So are you sort of asking, like, how do you introduce new flavors to them?
Yes, sir. I mean, to some extent, that is the same question I wanted to ask.
Okay. That's a great question. I think that a lot of the times, social endorsement is a key way to initiate change. So, for example, if they are going to restaurants that are making traditional items and the restaurant starts branching out a little bit and they have a relationship maybe with the server there, somebody who's working there, and that person suggests to them something new, they're going to be a lot more likely to try it. So I think what you want to do is identify people who would be considered influencers in the community, create sampling opportunities for them. And if they have good things to say about it and they like telling their friends, that's a very, very good way to initiate change, especially in small environments like that. So I would say a fairly...
Thank you, sir. That answers my question.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and another text question here. So, can I tell you about the use of robots in the hospitality industry is beneficial or not? These are great questions, and I think that they're things that we really grapple with in the modern era that we are currently in. I think that one of the things that's changing as a result of this is people have been very apprehensive about the introduction and use of technology in hotels and restaurants because it's viewed as impersonal, right? And now that safety is of a greater concern, I think that people are going to be much more accepting of automation in these environments because they're going to feel like it helps to protect their safety more. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for more robotics in hotels, and especially when that comes to cleaning. I was listening to a radio program here in Canada, and it was a company who sells robots to hospitals that actually cleans rooms using UV rays and UV light. So it takes the bacteria off. So I wouldn't be surprised if we could see some robotics in terms of cleaning and what that looks like in a hotel environment. We could be looking at contactless check-in. Again, I don't know if that's more technology than it is necessarily robotics. But I think that the door is open for that at this stage. That's going to advance much more quickly. So someone else has asked a question: will the food be stored or served like in the space, keeping in mind the severe pandemic and the hygiene standards and measures followed to keep them? Well, that is a great question, and you've been asking such good questions that I haven't actually been able to cover all the content I wanted to cover today, which is why we have another session tomorrow. So we are going to have another session tomorrow morning, same time, your time, at 10 a.m. And I'm going to be focusing on some of these specific changes that are happening in the front of house of restaurants, as well as some of the specific changes that are going to happen in kitchens, in restaurants as well. So with regards to that question, there are going to be some changes in kitchens in terms of how things are handled, and I'm going to go through what that process looks like in terms of making it a safer place. I think in terms of how food is stored and prepared, there may be some changes. Ultimately, I think a lot of that will be the same. More changes are going to happen in terms of cleaning protocols in the kitchen, and also personal hygiene and the health of the people working in the kitchen. So we can talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. So I know that it is 11 in the morning your time, so I just want to be respectful of the fact that we did book this for an hour. I won't cover any more new content today, but I will be back tomorrow at the same time with more content. If you do have any questions that you would like to ask via text, I will stay on for the next 10 minutes or so. But at this stage, I wanted to let you know it's really been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I hope that you're going to be able to come back and join me for our session tomorrow. We'll start getting into a few more details. So feel free, if you'd like to log off right now, you're welcome to. If you would like to put anything in the chat that I can respond to, you're also welcome to do that too. So thank you once again. My pleasure, Mr. Amit, sir. My pleasure, Harleen. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoy working and corresponding with your students.